Have you ever wondered what you would do if the one person who should love you, who should support you, treats you like you're invisible? It's a question that has haunted me for months now, ever since the day my son, David, announced he was getting married to Mia. The love of his life, he said. I remember the look on his face, the hope, the excitement, like he was about to embark on some great adventure, and I was supposed to be happy for him, to feel that joy alongside him. But instead, all I felt was a deep, unsettling knot in my stomach. I wanted to be thrilled for him, of course. What mother wouldn't want to see her child find someone they want to spend their life with? But something about Mia always made me uneasy. At first, I told myself it was just motherly instinct, that no one would ever be good enough for my son. But as time went on, I realized it was more than that. Mia had a way of making me feel like I was an afterthought, a shadow in the corner of David's life. Whenever I tried to be involved in the wedding planning, Mia would brush me off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, that's okay, Grace. We've already decided on the color scheme. Or, don't worry, we'll take care of the details." It's not that she was outright cruel or disrespectful, no. Mia was far too polished for that. But there was a coldness in her treatment of me, a lack of warmth, that left me feeling invisible. Like I didn't matter at all. And now, here we were, the wedding only days away, and the tension was reaching a boiling point. The invitation to the ceremony had already been sent out, the venue was booked, and the dress was hanging in my closet. I had done my part, but there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that this whole event was more about Mia and less about my son. As I sat at the kitchen table that morning, sipping my coffee, I replayed the latest conversation I'd had with Mia in my head. She had asked me, in that sweet, condescending tone of hers, whether I'd like to help with the guest list. I had barely managed to get out a yes before she cut me off. "Oh, Grace, I think we've got it covered. It's so much easier if we just handle it ourselves. You understand, right?" she had said, a thin smile on her face. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. It wasn't just the wedding, it was everything. From the moment Mia came into our lives, she had pushed me aside, subtly and quietly. She had taken my place in David's world, and I had let her. I had accepted it because I didn't want to create waves. After all, I was just his mother, right? What was my place if not to step aside and make room for his new life? But something inside me was breaking. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about respect. It was about my worth as a mother, as a person. I thought about David, the way he looked at me when we were alone. He loved me, I knew that. He had always been a good son, attentive and kind. But with Mia in the picture, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was distancing himself from me, too. There were times when I'd try to talk to him about the wedding, and he'd give me these vague answers, like he didn't want to confront the elephant in the room. He'd tell me it was all going to be fine, that Mia was just being a little stressed about the planning. But I wasn't stupid. I could see the cracks forming in their relationship, even if he couldn't. I could feel the tension whenever Mia was around, the way she subtly took over every conversation, every decision, like I didn't exist. I wanted to ask him no, demand to know why he was letting Mia treat me this way, but every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck. I didn't want to alienate him, didn't want to push him further away. But the truth was, I was getting tired. I was tired of being invisible, tired of pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. That's when I made a decision. I stood up from the table and walked over to the mirror hanging by the door. I looked at my reflection, at the woman who had spent years taking care of her family, nurturing them, giving them everything she had. And in that moment, I saw something in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years: anger. But it wasn't just any anger. It was the kind of anger that came from a place of deep hurt. The kind of anger that said, "You've had enough." I had been quiet for so long. I had let Mia walk all over me. I had let my son drift away, thinking that if I just kept my mouth shut, everything would be okay. But now I was done. The wedding was only days away. I had tried to keep the peace, tried to pretend that everything was fine, but something had to give. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit in the background any longer. This was my son's wedding, yes, but it was also my life. And I was going to make sure that Mia understood that. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. I muttered to myself, remembering the last thing I'd seen on my phone before heading into the kitchen. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? For me, it was my son. And I would do anything to make sure he knew that. Anything. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I made all the wrong choices when it came to raising David. Could I have been a better mother? Could I have taught him to stand up for what was right, even when it meant going against the people he loved? The questions swirl in my mind more often than I care to admit, but I try not to dwell on them. Because despite everything that has happened, I know one thing for sure. I loved him with all my heart. David wasn't always easy to raise. Like most kids, he had his moments of rebellion. His teenage years were especially trying. But there was always something about him that made me proud. He was kind, thoughtful, and fiercely protective of the people he loved. Even as a young boy, he had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered. And I made sure he knew that I would always be there for him, no matter what. It's a lesson I carried with me even now. I remember his first day of school like it was yesterday. He was 6 years old, excited and nervous all at once. As I walked him to the bus stop, I held his hand tightly, reminding him that no matter what, I'd always be there when he needed me. He was so little, with big eyes that looked up at me for reassurance, and I could feel the weight of my promise. David grew into a young man with a big heart and a desire to make a difference in the world. He was always the one volunteering at community events, helping neighbors with projects, and offering support to his friends when they needed it most. He was the kind of person who would drop everything to help someone in need. As a mother, I couldn't have asked for more. His relationship with Mia, however, was something entirely different. When I first met her, I wanted to believe that she was the one for him. She was beautiful, polished, and confident, everything I thought he deserved. But there was something about her that rubbed me the wrong way. At first, I dismissed it, thinking maybe it was just my own insecurities. After all, this was my son's future, and who was I to judge the woman he had chosen to be with? But over time, Mia's behavior became harder to ignore. She was always polite, always charming, but it was the little things that stood out. The way she'd interrupt me when I spoke, the way she'd act like my opinions didn't matter. At first, I convinced myself I was being too sensitive, but the more I observed, the more I began to feel like an outsider in my own family. David, for his part, seemed to be blissfully unaware of Mia's subtle jabs. He was so in love with her that he couldn't see the cracks starting to form between them. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would brush it off, assuring me that everything was fine. That Mia was just a bit high-strung with wedding preparations. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I wanted to be there for David, but at every turn, Mia seemed to shut me out. It wasn't just the wedding planning, it was how she interacted with me in general. There were times when I felt like I was invisible, like I didn't even exist in her eyes. And it hurt. When David came to me one evening and told me he was going to propose, I was overjoyed for him. The moment felt like one of those milestones in life that you always look forward to as a parent. I had imagined this moment so many times, David finding a woman who would cherish him the way I did. I couldn't have asked for anything more. But when I saw Mia's face light up at the proposal, I knew something had shifted. There was no room for me in that moment. It was like I had been erased from the equation. Over the months that followed, as the wedding plans began to take shape, I found myself retreating into the background, just like Mia had intended. I told myself it didn't matter. It was their wedding, their day. But the more I distanced myself, the more I realized how much I had come to resent the entire situation. Mia had taken over everything, and I had allowed it to happen. I had accepted being treated as secondary, as insignificant, because I didn't want to make waves. And that was the problem. I had always been the peacekeeper. The one who smiled through my pain, who swallowed my hurt in the name of family harmony. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't rock the boat, things would work out. But the truth was, I was losing myself in the process. The moment that changed everything came during a phone call with David one night. He sounded excited, as usual, about the wedding details, but when I tried to share some of my thoughts, he cut me off. "Mom, it's fine. We've already taken care of it." His words were harmless enough, but the tone, the dismissive, almost impatient tone, stung. I could hear the frustration in his voice, as though my opinions didn't matter. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. I had allowed Mia to shape my son's world, and now he was slipping away from me. I sat there for a long time after that phone call, thinking about everything I had put up with, everything I had accepted. I wanted to be supportive, to be the mother who stood proudly by her son on his wedding day. But how could I do that when I felt like a stranger in my own family? I thought back to all the times I had sacrificed my own happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. The times I had bitten my tongue, told myself it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered more than anything. I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I couldn't keep letting Mia walk all over me, couldn't keep allowing my son to distance himself from me. I had to stand up for myself, for the woman I had become, for the mother who had given everything for her son. The decision wasn't easy, but it was clear. I would no longer sit quietly in the background. If Mia was going to continue treating me like I didn't matter, I wasn't going to let her do it without consequences. Tomorrow, the wedding would continue as planned. But I wasn't sure it would be the same after that. Because in my heart, I knew things were about to change. And I wasn't sure how David would feel about it. The days leading up to David's wedding felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. I could sense the tension in the air, thick and unspoken, hovering between my son and me. I kept telling myself it was just wedding stress, that things would settle after the big day. But deep down, I knew something had shifted, something that couldn't be ignored any longer. It was the little things, those subtle moments that began to make me feel like a guest in my own life. Mia had managed to make everything about her, her vision for the wedding, her rules, her decisions. And I had swallowed it all because I didn't want to rock the boat. After all, this was supposed to be David's big moment, right? But what about my moment? What about the woman who had raised him, loved him, guided him through his life? What about the mother who had given everything to ensure he had the best life possible? For months, I had sacrificed my presence, my voice, for the sake of peace. And now it felt like I had sacrificed my place in his heart, too. As the wedding day grew closer, I found myself feeling more like an outsider. Mia would smile sweetly at me, but there was always a sense of distance, an invisible barrier between us. And David, my sweet boy, seemed to be slipping away with every passing day. He was caught in this whirlwind of wedding planning, of making sure everything was perfect, and I could see that he was consumed by it. I tried to reach out to him, tried to talk to him the way I always had, but each conversation felt more and more strained. I had so many things I wanted to say, but I held back, afraid of pushing him further away. There was a moment, just days before the wedding, when I finally found the courage to confront him. We were sitting in the living room, and the house was quiet, save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I could feel the weight of the moment, the tension that had been building for months now, crackling in the air between us. "David," I said softly, my voice trembling a little, "we need to talk." He looked up from his phone, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What's wrong, Mom?" I don't know how to say this," I began, my heart pounding in my chest. "I feel like you're drifting away from me. It's like every time I try to be part of this wedding, part of your life, you push me aside." He blinked at me, looking more surprised than concerned. "What are you talking about? You're the one who's been so busy with other things. Mia and we've been working on all this stuff together." "I know, but..." I hesitated, unsure of how to frame it without sounding too harsh. "But Mia has been running the show, David. I barely have a say in anything anymore." She's making all the decisions, and I don't know, I'm just here. His face softened, but there was a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. Mom, you're being too dramatic. Mia's just stressed with the wedding stuff. She's trying to make it perfect for us. We're doing this together. It's not about you being left out. But it is about me, I said, my voice rising a little. I'm your mother, David. I should be included in this. I've been there for you your whole life, and now I feel like I'm nothing to you. I watched as his expression shifted, the familiar frustration creeping into his features. Mom, you're being ridiculous. I love you, but this is my wedding. Mia and I are trying to make everything work, and I don't have time for all of this drama. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Drama. That's what he thought this was. Not a mother's genuine hurt, not the pain of feeling rejected by the one person who should have been there for me. No, it was just drama. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. I'm not trying to cause drama. I'm just asking for some respect. For my place in your life, in this wedding. David stood up then, his frustration palpable. I don't need you to tell me how to handle my own wedding, okay? Mia and I have everything under control. You should just relax and enjoy it. This isn't about you. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there alone with my thoughts. The conversation left me feeling hollow, as though the last bit of connection I had with my son had snapped. The feeling of rejection was so overwhelming that I could hardly breathe. I had tried, really tried, to be understanding, to put my own feelings aside for the sake of his happiness. But the more I tried to reach him, the further he seemed to slip away. I sat there in the silence, replaying his words in my mind. This isn't about you. Was that it? Was I really just a background character in the story of his life? Was my role as a mother nothing more than a formality now? I wanted to scream, to run after him and demand he see me, truly see me, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, frozen, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, hurt, betrayal. The mix of it all left me feeling dizzy, unsure of what to do next. I thought about the wedding again. I had spent months preparing for this day, even though Mia had made it clear I wasn't needed. And now, with just days to go, I wasn't sure I could stand by and watch it all unfold. I wasn't sure I could pretend to be happy when my heart felt so heavy with resentment. This wedding was supposed to be a celebration of love, but all I felt was a growing distance between myself and the two people I cared about most. And with each passing day, it became clearer to me, this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about something deeper. Something that had been brewing under the surface for a long time. The conflict wasn't just about a wedding, it was about my place in my son's life. And I was starting to question if I even had one anymore. The morning of the wedding arrived, and everything seemed to be moving in slow motion. I could hear the bustle of the house, voices and laughter drifting from the kitchen as the final touches were put on the decorations. Mia was there, of course, overseeing every little detail. I caught glimpses of her as she passed through the hallway, her sharp eyes scanning everything, making sure it was perfect. And then there was David, busy with last-minute arrangements, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I wanted so badly to be excited for him. I wanted to smile and support him with all my heart, to see him happy as he married the woman he loved. But as I watched him interact with Mia, my heart felt heavier. It wasn't just the wedding, it was the unspoken wedge between us, the growing chasm that I wasn't sure could be bridged anymore. I stood by the window, staring out at the garden where the ceremony was set to take place. The sun was shining, the flowers were in full bloom, and everything looked perfect, just the way Mia wanted it. But none of it felt right to me. I tried to push my feelings aside, telling myself that today was about David. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about the years of raising him, the sacrifices, the love. Today, he was starting a new chapter, and I needed to accept that. But I couldn't. As I moved away from the window, I found myself standing in front of the mirror. I hadn't put on my dress yet. It still hung on the back of the door, untouched, A reminder of all the roles I had played in David's life. The mother, the caregiver, the quiet supporter. But now, in this moment, I felt more like an outsider. I reached for the dress and slipped it on, the fabric cool against my skin. It was a beautiful gown, simple yet elegant, something I had chosen with care. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt like a stranger in it. The woman staring back at me was a mother, yes, but she was also someone who had been forgotten, overlooked, left behind. The emotions were overwhelming: anger, sadness, betrayal, and I could feel them threatening to consume me. I couldn't let them, though. I had to go through with this. I had to be there for David, even if it felt like I was slowly losing him. I took a deep breath and walked downstairs, trying to steady my nerves. The house was buzzing with activity as people milled about, preparing for the ceremony. Mia was in the kitchen with the florist, arranging bouquets and adjusting vases with a look of utter focus. David was with his best man, talking about the final touches for the ceremony. I found a quiet corner and stood there for a moment, just watching everything unfold. This was supposed to be a happy day, a joyous occasion. And yet, I felt like I was watching a movie, disconnected from the reality of it all. As the minutes passed, I tried to summon the energy to go up to David, to talk to him, to tell him how I felt. But every time I thought about it, I remembered his words from our last conversation: "This isn't about you." The thought of confronting him again, of risking another argument, made my stomach churn. Mia appeared then, walking toward me with that same forced smile. "Grace," she said, her voice smooth, but there was something behind her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "Everything's coming together perfectly, don't you think?" I smiled, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yes, it looks beautiful. You've really outdone yourself." She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you're here, Grace. It means a lot to David. I know this day is important for both of you." Something in her words made my skin crawl, the way she said "important for both of you," as if she was trying to convince herself more than me. But I nodded politely, not trusting myself to say anything more. Then, as she turned to walk away, she stopped and glanced back at me. "Oh, and don't forget, we'll need you to sit at the front with David's father. You know, for the pictures." That was it. That one sentence, so casual, so offhand, hit me like a punch in the gut. I wasn't just an afterthought in this wedding. I was a prop. I tried to steady my breath, the hurt building up like a tidal wave in my chest. But I forced a smile. "Of course. I'll be there." As she walked off, I stood there for a long time, the weight of her words sinking in. A prop. That's how she saw me. It wasn't about my love for David. It wasn't about me being his mother. It was about appearances, about her controlling every detail of this day. And in that moment, I realized just how much of myself I had lost in trying to keep the peace. How much of me had been erased in the process. I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to let her see me break. I wasn't going to let her have that satisfaction. David was standing near the door, ready to head to the ceremony. He saw me standing there, looking lost in my thoughts. For a moment, our eyes met. I could see the love in his gaze, but also something else, something distant, almost like a part of him had already checked out. I walked toward him, my heart in my throat. This was the moment. I had to say something. I couldn't just let this day pass by without telling him how I felt. "David," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I love you. You know that, right?" He smiled, but it was forced. "I love you too, Mom. This is going to be great. Just wait until you see Mia in her dress. She looks incredible." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That the distance between us wasn't just about this wedding. It was something deeper, something we hadn't been able to talk about. But today, it seemed like all the things I had been holding inside for so long were about to come to the surface. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. The wedding would go on, of course. It had to. But I knew now that the person I was before this day, before all of Mia's dominance, before the distance between David and me, was gone. And nothing would ever be the same. The wedding ceremony was a blur. I stood at the front with David's father, as Mia had instructed, smiling for the cameras, playing my part. I could barely feel the warmth of the sun on my skin, or hear the laughter of the guests in the background. My mind was elsewhere, caught in a whirlwind of emotions I wasn't sure how to handle. David looked so handsome in his suit, standing tall and confident as he exchanged vows with Mia. They looked perfect together, like a picture from a fairy tale, as if nothing in the world could ruin their happiness. And yet, as I watched him, I felt a pang of loss. It wasn't just that he was getting married. It was that I was losing him, bit by bit, to a woman who seemed determined to erase everything I had been to him. As the ceremony progressed, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Mia's smile, though radiant, seemed forced, almost rehearsed. And David, his gaze kept darting around, not fully present, not fully connected to the moment. It was like he was somewhere else, lost in a world where I didn't exist. The vows were exchanged, the rings were slipped onto fingers, and the guests cheered as they were pronounced husband and wife. But as they kissed, I couldn't help but feel a sinking in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was something far worse, a deep, aching sense of abandonment. The reception that followed was loud, full of laughter and music, but I couldn't find joy in any of it. Mia moved about the room like a queen, greeting everyone with that perfect smile of hers. She had her arms wrapped tightly around David, as if she owned him now, and I was just a shadow in the background. At one point, I found myself sitting alone at the table, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations drifting through the air. I had always been part of these moments, part of the celebrations, part of the memories. But tonight, I felt invisible. As the evening wore on, I tried to engage in conversation with some of the other guests, but my thoughts kept drifting back to David, to what I had lost, to what I might never have again. The moment that would change everything came when the music shifted, signaling the start of the father-daughter dance. I watched as Mia stepped into David's arms, her eyes shining with happiness, her face glowing. I could see how much this moment meant to her, how it was everything she had dreamed of. And I couldn't fault her for it. She deserved to have her perfect day, her perfect life. But then something unexpected happened. As the dance went on, Mia caught sight of me across the room. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she quickly masked it. She whispered something into David's ear, and he turned to look at me. Our eyes met, and, for a brief moment, I thought I saw something there, a flicker of recognition. But it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. Without a word, David excused himself from Mia and made his way over to where I was sitting. The moment his hand touched my shoulder, I felt a wave of emotion hit me. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding back until that moment, how much I had buried deep down in an effort to keep the peace, to not make a scene. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk for a second?" I nodded, my throat tight with emotion, but I didn't trust myself to speak. He led me out onto the balcony, away from the noise of the reception, and we stood there in the cool evening air. The sky above was dark, the stars twinkling, but all I could focus on was the distance between us. "I know this day's been hard for you," he started, his voice softer than I had heard in months. "And I haven't been the best son. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make things right between us." I swallowed, trying to hold back tears. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to be that mother, the one who crumbled in front of her child. But David's words, his admission, hit me in a way that was impossible to ignore. "I don't need you to fix anything, David," I said, my voice shaking. "I just need you to see me, to see what's happening here. I've been pushed aside, David. I've been made to feel like I don't matter, like I'm just an extra in the story of yours. And I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with it." David's face softened, a look of guilt washing over him. "I never meant for you to feel that way. I swear I didn't. I shook my head. It's not just about you, David. It's about her too. Mia, she's changed everything. I don't know who I am in this family anymore. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, we just stood there, locked in a shared understanding of how much had been lost. There were no words for the depth of the hurt we both felt. Mom, he said, his voice breaking, I don't want to lose you. I don't want things to be like this. I don't know how to navigate all of this. I don't know how to make you feel like you're still my mother and not just someone on the sidelines. His words struck a chord deep inside me. This wasn't just about a wedding. It wasn't about Mia or her controlling ways. It was about David, about the man he was becoming, and how I had somehow become a stranger in his life. I just want you to remember that no matter what happens, I'm always your mother, I said, my voice a little stronger now. And no matter how many weddings come and go, no matter how much time passes, you'll always be my son. I just need you to understand that I'm still here, still me. David reached out, pulling me into a tight hug. I understand, Mom. I promise, I'll do better. I'll try harder to make sure you're not left out. As we stood there, holding each other, the sounds of the reception filtered in around us. The music, the laughter, the chatter. But for the first time that night, it didn't feel like I was alone. Maybe things weren't perfect. Maybe they never would be. But in that moment, I realized something. We still had a chance to fix this, to rebuild the connection we had lost. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and patience. But we could try. And that, at least, was a start. The days following the wedding passed in a blur, each one feeling like an echo of the last. Despite the fragile promise David made on the balcony, things didn't magically improve. The cracks between us remained, growing wider with every passing moment. And Mia, ever the poised orchestrator, continued to weave her web around David, subtly, meticulously, making sure that there was no room left for me in his life. I tried to be patient. I tried to give him space, to let him settle into his new life, but I couldn't help the gnawing feeling that he was slipping further and further away. And the harder I tried to hold on, the more I seemed to push him further into Mia's orbit. The first sign that things weren't improving came the week after the wedding. David called, as he often did, but there was a distance in his voice that hadn't been there before. The warmth that had once filled our conversations had turned to formality. "Hey, Mom," he greeted, but it felt like a distant memory, the ease of our earlier chats slipping away with each syllable. "How's everything?" "Fine," I said, trying to sound casual, though I could hear the strain in my own voice. "How about you and Mia? Settling into married life?" "It's good, yeah," he answered, but again, it was lacking something real, something heartfelt. "We're just getting through the post-wedding stuff, you know? It's a lot." I could hear the rustling of papers in the background, the clinking of something metallic. I pictured Mia, probably organizing the wedding gifts or planning their next steps, giving David no space to breathe. "Listen, David," I said, my voice softening. "I just wanted to check in. I know things have been complicated lately, but I miss you. I miss spending time together. We haven't really talked like we used to." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost feel the discomfort radiating from him. Then, finally, he spoke. "I know, Mom. I know. I've just been busy. Mia and I are trying to figure things out, you know." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I understand. But I hope you know that you're still my son. No matter what changes in your life, that won't change." "I know, Mom." I haven't forgotten. But I could tell that he had. Slowly, piece by piece, he was forgetting. The next few weeks were filled with small, insignificant moments that added up to a growing sense of isolation. I stopped getting invites to dinners, stopped receiving casual calls. Mia's presence was like a heavy fog, always looming in the background, and I found myself increasingly sidelined. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon when I received an invitation to David's birthday dinner. It was at a small Italian restaurant, a place we had gone to for years. I was excited, hopeful even, that it would be a chance to reconnect, to show him that I was still here, still trying. But when I arrived, I felt the weight of everything that had changed. The table was already set, and there was David, sitting beside Mia, with her hand resting possessively on his arm. As soon as I sat down, I felt the tension in the air. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Mia's sharp gaze never left me and David. David was distant. "Hey, Mom," he said, his smile strained. "Glad you could make it." "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile of my own. "Happy birthday, David." We exchanged a few polite words, but the conversation never went deeper than surface level. Mia dominated the evening, directing the conversation, controlling the narrative. She talked about the house they were planning to buy, about their vacation plans, about all the things that now filled David's life. But there was nothing about us, no mention of our past, of the history we shared. It was like it didn't matter anymore. The dinner was a painful affair, filled with awkward pauses and uncomfortable glances. I could feel the sharpness of Mia's judgment every time I spoke, as if she was constantly weighing my words, my actions, trying to determine whether I was a threat to her new life with David. But the final straw came when dessert was served. I had just taken a bite of the tiramisu when David looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Mom," he said, his voice suddenly flat. "I think it's time we talked about some things." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. The moment I would finally hear the words I didn't want to hear. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. David hesitated before speaking again, his gaze flickering toward Mia for a brief moment. I could see her holding her breath, waiting for his next words. And then, with a quiet finality, he said, "Mia and I talked, and we think it's best if we start creating our own space, you know? I think it's time for you to let go a little." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the gut. Let go? Of him? Of everything we had built together? I didn't know how to respond. Mia's eyes gleamed, but there was no warmth there. She was the one who had planted that seed in David's mind. The one who had convinced him that the best thing for them, for their marriage, was to sever the last remaining thread that tied me to him. I felt the tears welling up, but I held them back. I couldn't cry in front of them. I couldn't give Mia the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, I was shattering. "I don't understand, David," I whispered. "What do you mean? You're my son. How can I let go of that?" David's voice softened, but his words were cold. "I know you're my mom, but things have changed. Mia is my wife now. I have to prioritize her." The silence that followed felt suffocating. I wanted to say something, anything, to make him understand, to make him see how much this hurt. But the words wouldn't come. And even if they did, I knew it wouldn't change anything. I stood up, my hands trembling. "I think it's best if I go," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. David didn't stop me. Neither did Mia. They just watched as I walked out, the door closing behind me with the finality of a chapter ending. As I stepped into the cool night air, I realized something. I had given everything to David, every part of me. And now I was nothing more than a distant memory, a relic of a past life. I wasn't sure where I would go from here, but one thing was clear. The woman I had been before this moment was gone. And the woman I would become? I wasn't sure yet. But I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. It had been a week since the birthday dinner, and the silence was deafening. David hadn't called. Mia hadn't reached out. There were no texts, no just checking in messages. The emptiness of it all was unbearable. It was like I had disappeared from their lives entirely, as though I never existed in the first place. I found myself sitting on the couch more often than not, staring at the walls, replaying that night over and over again in my mind. David's words, his lack of emotion, the cold finality in his voice. "Mia is my wife now. I have to prioritize her." Those words echoed in my mind, and with each passing day, they took on new meaning. It wasn't just about Mia. It was about a shift in David's heart, a shift that left me on the outside. I had tried to call him once, but after 2 rings, the voicemail kicked in. "Hey, it's David. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message, and I'll get back to you." That was it. No warmth, no urgency to hear from me. Just business as usual. I sat back, trying to control the storm of emotions within me. The frustration, the hurt, the anger. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something much deeper was at play. Mia's influence on David had gone beyond what I had expected. It wasn't just about her being a new part of his life. It was about her turning him against me, subtly, quietly, like a snake in the grass. I had never seen it coming. The slow, insidious way she had inserted herself into his world, chipping away at the bond David and I had built over the years. At first, it was small little comments here and there, as if suggesting how much better things would be if I stepped back. Then it became more overt. Invitations to events where I was conveniently left out, social gatherings where Mia made sure to dominate the conversation, leaving me isolated in my own son's life. I had no choice but to admit it to myself. I was losing the battle, and I didn't know how to fight back. But the thing about battles, about wars, is that they aren't always won on the battlefield. Sometimes, it's the quiet moments, the subtle shifts, that make all the difference. And that's what I was starting to realize. It was time to stop reacting. It was time to stop being the passive player in this game. I had let Mia dictate the terms for too long. It was time to make my move. I picked up the phone again, this time with purpose. I didn't wait for the voicemail to pick up. This time, I would speak. Be strong, I told myself. You're not just his mother. You're a woman who deserves respect. David, it's Mom, I said into the phone, my voice calm but firm. I'm not sure what's going on with us, but I can't keep living like this. I need you to understand something. No matter how many times you and Mia try to push me out, no matter how many times you make me feel like I don't belong in your life anymore, I will always be your mother. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for loving you or caring about you. And I'm certainly not going to apologize for wanting a relationship with you. I paused, taking a deep breath. The words had come out faster than I intended, but they were out now. And I wasn't going to take them back. I need you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. But I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I miss you, David. And I just want to have you back in my life. But if that's not something you want, if that's not something you're willing to fight for, then I'll accept it. But you need to tell me. I need to know where I stand. I hung up, the silence that followed feeling like the heaviest weight I had ever carried. The phone call had been a gamble, a final push in what had been a one-sided war. But there was no turning back now. I had taken a stand. And now I would have to wait and see if David would answer. The days that followed were excruciating. I checked my phone constantly, hoping for a response, but there was nothing. No message, no call back. Just the same empty silence. I couldn't help but feel like I was in the middle of a quiet war. A war that no one could see, a war that was being fought with words unsaid, with actions ignored, with silences that spoke louder than any confrontation. Mia had her hold on David, and he was allowing it to happen. Slowly, I was being erased from his life, and I had no idea how to stop it. But that didn't mean I would give up. Not yet. I knew I had to give him space. I knew I had to let him come to his own conclusions, let him see what was happening before it was too late. But it was harder than I had ever imagined. Watching him slip away, watching him fade from my life like a ghost, it was agonizing. And in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making a mistake. If, by standing up for myself, I was pushing him further into Mia's arms. Maybe this was all my fault. Maybe if I had just stayed quiet, stayed in the background, things wouldn't have come to this. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep being the woman who was always pushed aside. I couldn't keep playing the role of the silent, invisible mother. If David wanted to forget about me, If he wanted to throw away our bond for the sake of his wife, then that was his choice. But I wouldn't go down without a fight. I wouldn't let them erase me from his life without knowing that I had fought for my place. And if it meant making difficult choices, then so be it. I would fight for my son, for my place in his heart, no matter how long it took. And if Mia thought she had won, if she thought she had pushed me out for good, she was about to learn a lesson. I wasn't done yet. The silence dragged on, stretching endlessly. Every day without a word from David felt like 1,000 years. The emptiness was suffocating, each passing moment making the distance between us feel wider than ever. I had hoped that after my call, after my plea for clarity, David would come to his senses, but the phone remained silent, and the distance only grew. I had tried to distract myself. I threw myself into my work, spent time with friends, even picked up new hobbies that I'd neglected for years. But nothing filled the space that David had once occupied in my life. I missed the simple things, our conversations over coffee, the way he would call me just to check in, the little moments that used to define our relationship. It wasn't just the absence of David that hurt. It was the absence of the love we had shared. And with each passing day, I began to wonder if it was too late for us to find our way back to one another. Then, one rainy afternoon, I got an unexpected knock on my door. It was the kind of knock that wasn't urgent, but it carried a weight that made my heart skip a beat. I opened the door, and there, standing on the porch with his head slightly bowed against the rain, was David. I froze for a moment, the shock of seeing him after all this time catching me off guard. For a brief second, I almost thought I imagined it, that my longing for him had manifested in a hallucination. But no, it was real. He was standing there, his hair damp from the rain, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. "David," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me, his face unreadable, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. He didn't speak right away, and for a moment, the silence between us was almost suffocating. It felt like everything that had happened, everything that had been left unsaid, hung in the air between us. Finally, he stepped forward, his voice low and uncertain. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, almost instinctively, and he entered without another word. I led him into the living room, where the light was soft and comforting, but there was still a coldness in the air, an unspoken tension that neither of us seemed to know how to address. David sat down on the couch, and I could feel the weight of his presence, as though this moment could tip either way. The unspoken words between us were palpable, filling the space between every glance and every pause. I couldn't help but study his face, searching for any sign of the son I had known, the one who had always turned to me when life became too difficult. "Why didn't you call?" I asked, unable to hold back the question that had been burning in my mind. "After everything I said, I thought you would at least answer." "You haven't called, David. You've been silent." He ran his hand through his wet hair, his eyes avoiding mine. "I didn't know what to say," he admitted. "I've been thinking a lot, Mom." "A lot about?" "Everything." I sat down across from him, trying not to let the desperation creep into my voice. "I just want to understand, David. I need to know why you've been so distant. It feels like you've been slipping away from me, and I don't know why." David's shoulders slumped, and he sighed deeply, as if carrying a weight too heavy to bear. "It's not just you, Mom. It's everything. Mia and I have been trying to figure out our life together, and there's just so much pressure. There's so much expectation from both sides. It's been overwhelming." I nodded, trying to stay composed, trying not to let the hurt I was feeling show in my face. "I understand that, David. I know things have changed for you, but that doesn't mean you have to shut me out. I'm your mother. I'm still here. I'm still the same person who's always been there for you." His eyes finally met mine, and I could see the struggle within him, the conflict that had been tearing him apart. "It's not that I'm trying to shut you out, Mom. It's complicated. She's been very clear about what she wants, and I've tried to be there for her. I've tried to balance everything, but I'm losing myself in the process. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, but also a deep frustration. David, you're losing yourself because you're letting other people dictate who you should be. You've always known who you are. You've always been strong enough to stand up for yourself. I raised you to be that way. But now it seems like you're letting Mia and everyone else control your life. He ran his fingers through his hair again, his gaze distant. I don't know anymore, Mom. I really don't. I love Mia. I do. But I feel like I've lost touch with what matters. And I'm scared that I've already made too many mistakes to fix things. Scared that I've hurt you too much. I reached out, my hand resting gently on his. David, you haven't ruined anything. But you have to make a choice. You can't live in a world where you try to please everyone. You have to stand up for yourself and for the people who love you, without sacrificing who you are. He met my eyes, his expression raw and open in a way I hadn't seen in months. I don't know how to do that anymore, Mom. My heart broke for him. In that moment, I realized how much he had been struggling. I had been so consumed by my own pain that I hadn't stopped to think about his. He had been trying to navigate a new life, a life where he was torn between his love for Mia and his loyalty to me, his mother. I squeezed his hand gently. You don't have to have all the answers right now. We can figure it out together. But you need to be honest with me, with yourself, about where you stand. You need to decide what matters most, and then stand by it. David's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, a real smile, small but genuine, flickered across his face. I'll try, Mom. I promise. As he said those words, I felt a glimmer of hope, the smallest spark that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. And I knew I couldn't force him to choose. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my son back. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. After David's unexpected visit, a quiet sense of hope began to grow within me. It was still fragile, like a sprout breaking through the soil after a long winter, but it was there. At least now we had begun to talk again, and that alone gave me more comfort than I had imagined possible just a few days ago. But I knew the journey ahead would be difficult. Conversations like the one we had weren't the kind that fix everything in an instant. Trust had been broken, and it would take time to rebuild. The days after David's visit passed in a blur of cautious optimism. We exchanged a few more texts, mostly about trivial things, catching up on work or his upcoming plans, but they were more than I had received in the weeks prior. I could tell that he was making an effort, even if it was just the smallest one. And though I was grateful for the steps, I knew that the real work still lay ahead. Mia still hung between us like an invisible shadow, a constant presence I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, sipping my tea and staring out at the garden. The sky was a pale shade of pink as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the air had a stillness to it that made everything feel oddly peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that made me reflect more than I wanted to, but I couldn't escape the thoughts that kept creeping into my mind. Mia. Her influence on David. The way things had changed between us. I had never been the type to focus on blame, but the truth was hard to ignore. Mia had come into David's life with all the subtlety of a hurricane, turning everything upside down without ever having to say a word. It was as if she had been slowly building a wall between us, brick by brick, and I hadn't even noticed until it was too late. But I had noticed now, I thought bitterly. And the wall between David and me was something I couldn't just accept. I didn't want to fight her. That wasn't the point. But I was beginning to feel that if things were going to change, I had to make my voice heard, even if it meant having an uncomfortable conversation. The next day, I made the decision to do something I had been putting off for far too long. I was going to call Mia. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to accomplish. Maybe I was hoping for an apology. Maybe I just needed to understand her side. Whatever the reason, I had to try. I picked up the phone and dialed her number, the anxiety building in my chest with each ring. When she finally answered, her voice was calm, almost businesslike. "Hello, Mia, it's Mom," I said, my voice wavering slightly despite my best efforts. "I need to talk to you." There was a pause on the other end, a brief silence before she responded. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Lane. What's on your mind?" I could feel the distance in her tone, the cold politeness she always used when speaking to me. It was like a shield, keeping me at arm's length. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. "I think we need to talk about David," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "About everything that's been going on. I'm sure you've noticed that things between me and him have changed. And I need to know if there's a way we can work through this. I don't want to be distant from him anymore, Mia. I want my son back." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, almost like she was deciding how to respond. Then she spoke, her voice softer, but still measured. "I don't want to cause any more problems between you two, Mrs. Lane," she said, her words careful. "David loves you. He always has. But sometimes he just needs space to grow, to figure things out on his own." I felt a flash of anger rise in me. Space to grow? I had been his mother for his entire life. I had been the one who supported him, who raised him, who was always there. And now I was being told to step aside and give him space? "I understand that, Mia," I said, my voice tight with restraint. "But I've been a part of his life for so long. I don't know what's happening, but I can't just sit back and watch him drift away without doing something. We used to be close, and I miss him." There was another pause, this one longer, before Mia spoke again. "I know you miss him, Mrs. Lane," she said quietly. "I can see that. And maybe it's not all my fault, but I'm just trying to find my place too. I didn't ask for things to be this way. But David, he's changed. And we're both just trying to figure it out." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She's just trying to figure it out too. That part of the conversation softened something inside me. Maybe she wasn't the villain I had painted her to be all along. Maybe she was just as lost as I was. "I don't want to be at odds with you, Mia," I said, my voice more even now. "I just want to find a way to connect with David again. I know things can't go back to how they were, but I don't want to lose him forever. I don't want to be an outsider in his life." There was a long pause, and for the first time in this conversation, I felt like we were on the same page. Maybe we didn't agree on everything, but I was beginning to feel like Mia understood where I was coming from. "I don't want that either," Mia said softly. "I never wanted to take him away from you. He's always going to be your son. And I guess I just want to help, too. But I can't fix everything. Neither can you. All we can do is try." It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were no grand apologies or promises to suddenly fix everything. But in that moment, it felt like the first crack in the wall between us. It wasn't much, but it was something. "I'm glad we talked," I said, finally allowing myself to feel a sense of relief. "Maybe we can figure this out together." "Maybe we can," Mia replied. We ended the call, and I sat there for a while, letting the conversation sink in. It wasn't the perfect solution I had hoped for, but it was a step forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. Maybe David and I could find our way back to each other after all. And maybe Mia, despite everything, wasn't as much of an enemy as I had once thought. It was a small beginning, but I could feel the weight of it lifting just a little. And that, in itself, was enough for now. The days that followed were filled with an odd mix of anticipation and caution. After my conversation with Mia, I could feel a shift in the air, but I wasn't naive enough to believe that everything would suddenly resolve itself. Trust, after all, was something that needed to be rebuilt piece by piece, and it would take more than just a few phone calls to erase the emotional distance between David and me. I tried to take it one day at a time. David began texting me more regularly, but the conversations were still brief and guarded. We would chat about mundane topics, his work, the weather, the small moments in his life that never seemed important enough for a real conversation. I tried to keep my responses light, not wanting to push him too hard, but I couldn't help feeling the weight of everything unsaid. I had come to a point where I realized I couldn't force him to open up. If he wanted to talk about what was going on in his life, he would. If he wasn't ready, I had to respect that. But as much as I told myself that, the distance was becoming unbearable. One Saturday afternoon, a little over a week after my conversation with Mia, I was out running errands when I received a text from David. It was short, but the words held a weight that made my heart skip a beat. "Can we talk later? I need to figure something out." I stared at the message, my mind racing. My first instinct was to call him immediately, to ask him what was going on, but I resisted. He was asking for space, and I needed to respect that. I had already learned the hard way that pushing too hard could push him further away. Instead, I replied, "Of course, whenever you're ready." I spent the rest of the afternoon running errands, but my mind was elsewhere. The feeling of something shifting, something significant about to happen, weighed on me. I kept trying to imagine what David could be going through, what might have changed in his life recently to make him want to have a serious conversation. Was he finally coming to terms with the mess between us? Was he going to make a decision about Mia? Or was it something else entirely? I didn't know, but I could feel that the moment of truth was approaching. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a warm glow, my phone buzzed again. I picked it up and saw David's name on the screen. My pulse quickened. "Hello," I said, my voice steady despite the flurry of emotions building inside me. "Mom." David's voice came through, quiet but firm. "I think we need to talk in person. Can I come over?" I felt a rush of emotions, a mixture of hope, fear, and uncertainty, but I kept my composure. "Of course, David. Come whenever you're ready." I hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. This wasn't just a casual conversation. This was something important. Something that could change everything. I busied myself in the kitchen, tidying up, though my hands were shaking slightly as I moved around. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, seemed amplified in the silence. And then, just as the clock struck 7 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of David's car pulling into the driveway. My heart thudded in my chest as I walked to the door to greet him. I opened it to find him standing on the porch, his hands in his pockets, his face serious. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile, though my voice felt tight in my throat. "Come on in." He stepped inside, looking around the house as if seeing it with new eyes. We hadn't had many moments like this recently, where it was just the two of us alone in the quiet. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel the wall between us still lingering, even though we had started to talk again. We sat down on the couch, the silence stretching out between us like a chasm. I could feel my heart pounding, the anticipation of what was coming next making it hard to breathe. Finally, David spoke, his voice low and uncertain. "I've been thinking a lot, Mom. About everything. About Mia. About us." I held my breath, waiting for him to continue. "I've been putting off having this conversation because I didn't know what to say," he continued, running a hand through his hair. "But I can't keep ignoring it. I've been avoiding you, avoiding all of this, and I know it's wrong." I nodded, my throat tight as I watched him struggle to find the words. "David, I know you've been going through a lot. I'm not mad at you. But I need you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. I just want to understand what's happening in your life." David took a deep breath before he looked up at me, his eyes filled with emotion. "It's just, I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I had everything figured out with Mia. But lately, I've been feeling like I'm losing myself. I don't know if I'm making the right choices, and I don't know what the right thing to do is." His words struck me like a punch to the chest. The pain, the confusion, the uncertainty, it was all so clear in his eyes. David had always been strong, confident in his decisions. But now, for the first time in a long time, he was questioning everything. And I could see that he was looking for something from me, something I didn't know if I was capable of giving him just yet. David, I said softly, my voice breaking, you don't have to have all the answers right now. I know you're trying to figure out what you want. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I just want to help you find your way. And that means being honest with me. I know it's hard, but we need to talk about everything, the good, the bad, all of it. I can't help you if you don't let me in. David looked at me, his eyes softening just a little. I don't know if I can do that, Mom. I don't know if I can tell you everything. You don't have to tell me everything all at once, I said gently. But I need to know that you're not shutting me out completely, that we're still family, that we can still talk, even if it's messy. David's eyes flickered with emotion. I want that too. I don't know if I can fix everything. I don't know if I can make things right with Mia, with you, with myself. You don't have to fix everything overnight, I said, squeezing his hand. One step at a time, okay? We'll get through this together. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, David smiled, a small, tentative smile. Okay, one step at a time. I held his gaze, feeling a flicker of hope that, despite all the pain and confusion, we were on the path to healing. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I believed it was possible. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next few days after David's visit were surprisingly calm. It was as though we had reached a tentative truce, a silent agreement to give each other space while still acknowledging that we were both trying. But as the days stretched into weeks, the tension that had been building for so long began to resurface. It was one thing to say we were trying to make things work, but quite another to actually do it. David continued to keep his distance emotionally, and though we had made progress in our conversations, I could feel that the walls were still there, invisible but strong. We were making progress, but it wasn't enough. The silence between us felt different now, less about avoidance and more about uncertainty. He wasn't rejecting me outright, but he wasn't fully embracing me either. It was the beginning of a new phase, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was about to happen, something that would test the resolve of everyone involved. A week later, my phone rang again. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, the warm aroma of spaghetti filling the kitchen, when I saw his name flash across the screen. My heart skipped a beat. David? I answered, my voice filled with the quiet hope that had been growing inside me. Mom, he said, his voice tight. I need to talk to you. It's about Mia. I froze for a moment. Mia. The name alone was enough to make my stomach churn. She had been the thorn in my side for so long, the person I couldn't figure out how to deal with. The woman who had come into David's life and turned everything upside down. But I knew better than to let my feelings about her cloud this conversation. If David was reaching out, I couldn't afford to react impulsively. He was asking for help, and I needed to show up for him. Okay, I said, trying to steady my breathing. Come over when you're ready. There was a long pause before he responded. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up the phone, my mind racing with questions. What could he possibly want to talk about with Mia? Had something happened between them? I felt a sense of unease in the pit of my stomach, and I couldn't ignore it. I continued to prepare dinner, but it was as though my body was on autopilot, moving mechanically while my thoughts spun in 1,000 directions. When the doorbell rang, I practically jumped out of my skin. I opened the door to find David standing on the other side, his face strained. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and the tiredness in his eyes was unmistakable. Come in, I said, stepping aside so he could enter. He nodded and walked into the living room, sitting down on the couch without looking up. I could sense the weight of whatever he was carrying, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I sat down beside him, the silence between us stretching out until it became unbearable. I waited, letting him gather his thoughts. After a long moment, David finally spoke, his voice almost a whisper. Mom, I don't know what to do anymore, he said, his words barely audible. I've been thinking a lot about Mia, and about us. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle, like I'm betraying you by even thinking about her this way. But I can't help it. His words hit me like a wave. I had been waiting for this moment, but hearing him admit it out loud still made my heart ache. I knew this wasn't just about Mia. It was about everything, his relationship with her, his distance from me, the fear that had been gnawing at him for so long. David, I began softly, I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between me and her. But I do want you to understand how much you mean to me. I'm not asking you to cut her out of your life. But I need to know that you still care about our relationship, that you're not going to let it fade away. David swallowed hard, his eyes brimming with emotion. I care, Mom. I really do. But Mia, she's part of my life now. She's not just some phase. I don't know what the future holds, but I can't ignore how I feel about her. I nodded, fighting back tears. It was one thing to hear him say those words, but it was another thing entirely to accept them. He was right, Mia wasn't just some passing thing. She was real. And she had changed everything. I know you care, I said, my voice shaking. But what about us? I can't lose you, David. I don't want to be an afterthought in your life. I've given so much to you, and I don't want to feel like I'm being replaced by someone else. David's face softened, and he reached out, placing a hand on mine. I don't want to hurt you, Mom. I'm just so confused. I love Mia, but I don't want to lose you either. The sincerity in his voice broke me. I had never wanted to be the one to stand in the way of his happiness, but I also couldn't deny how much pain I felt from being pushed aside. We'll figure this out, David, I said, squeezing his hand tightly. I don't have all the answers, but I'm not going to give up on us. You're my son. I'll always be here. He nodded, a look of relief washing over his face. Thanks, Mom. I don't know what I would do without you. We sat there in silence for a while, each of us processing the weight of the conversation. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I wasn't fool enough to think that this was the end of the struggle. But it was something. A small step, a flicker of hope that perhaps we could find our way back to each other, no matter how complicated things were. As I looked at my son, I realized that sometimes love wasn't about easy answers. It was about being there for each other, even when the road ahead was uncertain. And if that meant walking through the discomfort and the mess of it all, then that was exactly what I was willing to do. The following week was a blur of mixed emotions. David and I had made progress, but it was painfully slow. He had seemed more distant than ever, unsure of how to navigate his feelings for Mia and his obligation to me. It felt like I was living in a constant state of suspense, waiting for the inevitable breaking point where everything would come to a head. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old family photos, I received another text from David. Can we talk? It read. I immediately felt a pang of unease. The words, so simple and direct, carried a weight I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. We had just started to rebuild our relationship, and now here we were again, on the precipice of something deeper, something that would test everything we had worked for. I paused for a moment, staring at the screen. My mind was racing, thinking about everything that had happened up to this point. I had tried my best to be patient with him, to offer him the space he needed to figure things out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation would be the one that defined everything. What was it this time? I asked myself, would it be a decision about Mia? Or perhaps something more personal? Something that was still too painful for him to say out loud? After a few minutes of internal debate, I replied, Sure, come over when you're ready. The message was simple, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of my own words. I knew what was coming, something that I had feared for a long time. I tried to shake off the dread that was settling in my chest, but it clung to me like a shadow. David arrived shortly after, looking even more weary than usual. He was holding something in his hands, a piece of paper. As soon as he walked in, I noticed his stiff posture, the way his eyes seemed clouded with uncertainty. I could feel the tension radiating off him, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment where everything would break. I tried to smile as I greeted him, but the smile felt hollow. "Hey, you okay?" He nodded, though his expression was tight. "I'm fine. Just tired." We sat down on the couch, the space between us heavy with unspoken words. I could see the way he was holding the paper in his hand, clutched tightly as if it were a lifeline. He wasn't ready to speak yet, and I didn't want to push him, but I could feel the storm brewing inside him. "Mom," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to say this, but I've made a decision." My heart skipped a beat. "A decision? What decision?" He exhaled sharply, his gaze dropping to the paper in his hands. "It's about Mia. And it's about me. I've been thinking a lot, and I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I can't keep living like this, caught between two worlds. I need to choose, and I've made my choice." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I stared at him, my throat tightening as I tried to process what he was saying. I felt like the room was closing in on me, the air growing heavier with each passing second. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. David looked at me, his eyes full of sadness and regret. "I'm going to stay with Mia. I need to try to see if we can make it work. I've been avoiding the truth for too long, and I can't do that anymore." I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. The pain was so sharp, so sudden, that I could hardly breathe. This wasn't just about Mia anymore. It was about everything I had feared. It was about losing my son, about realizing that the bond we once shared was slipping through my fingers, piece by piece. "David," I whispered, my voice breaking, "you don't have to make this choice. I'm your mother. You don't have to choose between me and her." He shook his head, his eyes filled with anguish. "I don't want to hurt you, Mom, but I've already been hurting. I've been so torn up inside, and I can't keep living this way. I need to figure this out, and I can't do it while I'm constantly worried about disappointing you." I was silent for a long moment, the words he had just spoken echoing in my mind. I could see the internal battle raging within him, the way he was struggling with his emotions, torn between his love for Mia and his love for me. But as much as I wanted to tell him that everything would be okay, that this was just a phase, I knew deep down that I couldn't protect him from the consequences of his choices. This wasn't a moment I could fix with words. It was something he had to figure out on his own. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "David, I don't want you to feel like you're failing me, but I need you to understand that I can't always be there to fix everything. I've raised you to be strong, to make your own decisions, even when they're hard. And this is a hard decision." His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy I had once held in my arms. "I don't want to lose you, Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "You're not losing me," I replied softly, though the words felt hollow in my throat. "But you need to stop running from what you really want. If Mia is the one you want to be with, then you need to own that. And if you want to work on this relationship with me, then you have to be honest about where you stand. I'll always love you, David. But I can't keep living in the shadows of your uncertainty." There was a long pause, the weight of our conversation hanging heavily in the air. David wiped at his eyes, trying to regain his composure. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know how to make everything right." I reached out and placed a hand on his. "You don't have to make everything right all at once. You just need to take responsibility for what's in front of you. And whatever happens, I'll still be here. But you have to decide who you want to be." David nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I think I need some time." "I understand," I said softly. "Take all the time you need. But just know that I'm not going anywhere, no matter what." As he stood up to leave, he looked at me one last time, a look of uncertainty still etched on his face. "Thanks, Mom. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll figure it out." I watched him walk out of the door, the weight of his decision settling deep in my chest. There was a part of me that wished things could go back to how they were, when everything was simpler. But I knew that wasn't possible. Life was complicated, and sometimes, the hardest decisions were the ones we had to make on our own. As I closed the door behind him, I whispered to the empty house, I hope you find your way, David. I really do. The silence in the house was deafening after David left. It felt as though the walls were closing in on me, squeezing all the air out of the room. I stood there for a moment, my hand still resting on the doorknob, processing what had just happened. David had made his choice. He had chosen Mia, and in doing so, he had essentially told me that I wasn't enough. The weight of that realization hit me with a force I hadn't expected. I had always thought I was his anchor, the one person who would never let him go. But now it seemed as though he was sailing away, drifting farther from me with every step he took. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room, my mind reeling. My gaze fell on the photos that lined the mantelpiece, pictures of David as a child, as a teenager, all the milestones of his life that I had been there for. Each photo seemed like a lifetime ago. It was hard to believe that the boy in those pictures was the same person who had just walked out of my life, at least for now. As I sank into the couch, I couldn't help but replay the conversation in my head. He had said he didn't want to hurt me, but that was exactly what he had done. His words had pierced my heart like a knife, and I couldn't seem to stop the tears from welling up in my eyes. I wiped them away quickly, not wanting to give in to the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. But even as the sadness swelled inside me, another feeling was starting to emerge: anger. Anger at Mia for coming into David's life and causing all of this. Anger at myself for not being enough to hold on to him. I hated feeling this way. It wasn't like me. I had always prided myself on being strong, on handling the challenges that life threw my way. But this was different. This was my son, the person I had loved and raised, the person who now seemed like a stranger. Just then, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be another message from David, but it was from an unknown number. Hesitant but curious, I opened it. "Hey, it's Mia. I know this might not be the right time, but I need to talk to you. Can you meet me? Please?" The message was short and direct, but it sent a chill down my spine. Mia. What could she possibly want now? After everything that had happened, after all the tension and the hurt, I wasn't sure I was ready to have a conversation with her. But something in the message, something that spoke of desperation, compelled me to reply. "Why now? What do you want?" Her response came almost immediately. "I'm sorry. I know things have been hard between us. But I need your help. I don't know who else to turn to." I stared at the screen, my mind swirling. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Mia was reaching out to me? The woman who had taken my son away, the woman I had resented for so long, was asking for help? "Fine," I typed, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. "We can talk. But I'm not making any promises." She quickly replied with a time and a place, a small cafe downtown. I had no idea what she wanted, but my curiosity got the better of me. If she was asking for my help, there had to be something more to this than what I could see on the surface. And if David was involved, then I couldn't just ignore it. An hour later, I arrived at the cafe, my stomach tied in knots. I didn't know what to expect, and frankly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. I had spent so many years resenting Mia, and now I was about to sit down with her, face to face. It felt surreal. I spotted her almost immediately as I walked in. She was sitting at a table near the window, her posture tense, her fingers nervously tapping on the cup in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her face tightening with a mix of anxiety and guilt. I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of the moment settle between us. I wasn't sure what to say, so I waited for her to speak first. "I know this is awkward," she began, her voice hesitant. "But I need you to understand something, and I need your help. David won't listen to me. He's so lost, so torn up inside. He won't open up about it, but I think he feels guilty for hurting you. I don't know how to help him anymore." I blinked, surprised by the raw honesty in her voice. This wasn't the Mia I had known, the confident, sometimes arrogant woman who had come into David's life like a whirlwind. This woman was fragile, vulnerable, almost lost. Guilty? I asked, trying to understand. For what? Mia's eyes lowered. For choosing me. For choosing us. He's always loved you, and now he feels like he's betrayed you. I've tried to talk to him, but he shuts me out. I don't know what to do anymore. I stared at her, absorbing her words. Was this some kind of manipulation? Or was she truly trying to help? It was hard to tell. But one thing was clear. David's pain was real, and it was affecting both of us in ways I couldn't have imagined. I leaned forward, my heart heavy. Mia, I don't know if I can help you with this. I don't know if I can fix what's broken between us. But I can tell you this much. If you really care about David, you'll have to help him find his own way. I can't do that for him. I've tried. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know, but I don't want to lose him, and I don't want you to lose him either. He's stuck, and he doesn't know how to get out of it. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't as far apart as I thought. Maybe Mia wasn't the enemy. Maybe we were both just two women trying to hold on to the same person, both of us desperate not to lose him. We're both trying, Mia, I said quietly. We both love him. That's something, isn't it? She nodded again, her voice breaking. I hope it's enough. I didn't know if it would be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end of everything. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to help David before it was too late. The days that followed my meeting with Mia were a blur. I hadn't expected to feel some kind of connection with her, especially after everything that had happened, but there was something in her vulnerability that had left a mark on me. I found myself thinking about our conversation often, replaying her words in my mind. I don't want to lose him, she had said, her voice quivering with a mixture of fear and regret. And I don't want you to lose him either. As much as I wanted to dismiss her plea as a manipulation, something inside me recognized the truth in her words. David was lost. He didn't know how to navigate his own emotions, let alone the complexities of his relationships. And now I had to accept that I wasn't the only one trying to hold him together. Mia was too. But there was still so much I didn't understand. Why hadn't David been more open with me? Why had he pushed me away for so long? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had spent so much time focusing on my own hurt that I had failed to see the depth of his struggle. I needed answers, but they weren't going to come easily. David was a complicated person, always had been, and now his silence was only making things worse. I couldn't fix this for him, no matter how much I wanted to. The realization that I was powerless in this situation stung, but it was also a necessary wake-up call. I found myself reaching out to David more often, but each time I did, the responses were brief, almost detached. It was as though he was a different person than the one I had known, and the distance between us felt more like an insurmountable chasm than just a few steps apart. One evening, after dinner, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone, willing David to call or text me. I had tried everything to get him to open up, gentle words, offers of support, even a few hard truths, but nothing seemed to reach him. I could feel the pain in my chest, that nagging fear that I was losing him for good. But deep down, I knew it was not just about the distance between us. It was about something deeper, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. I looked down and saw that it was a text from David. Mom, can we talk? My heart leaped into my throat. For the first time in weeks, he had reached out. The words seemed almost too good to be true, but I quickly typed back, not wanting to miss my chance. Of course. When? His response came almost immediately. I'll come over in an hour. I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. An hour. Just enough time to prepare myself for whatever was coming. I couldn't help but wonder if this conversation would finally answer the questions I had been carrying with me for so long. When David arrived, he looked more exhausted than I had ever seen him. His eyes were heavy, and his shoulders seemed weighed down by a burden I couldn't see. He had been through so much, and yet there was an unmistakable sense of defeat in the way he carried himself. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, his hands clenched tightly together. There was a long silence between us, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. I wanted to say something, to break the silence, but I knew he had to speak first. "I've been thinking about a lot of things, Mom," he said quietly. His voice was softer than usual, almost vulnerable. "I've been running from them. From you. From the truth." I didn't say anything, just nodded, willing him to continue. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought Mia and I could make it work, that if I just tried hard enough, everything would fall into place. He paused, his eyes filled with pain. But I was wrong. I've been lying to myself, pretending that it was all okay. But it's not. My heart ached as I listened to him speak. This wasn't the confident, decisive person I had known. This was a young man who had been struggling with the weight of his own choices, unsure of how to reconcile his love for Mia with his love for me. "I feel like I'm drowning, Mom. Every time I try to take a step forward, I just get pulled back into the same mess." Mia and I were not in the same place. I thought I could fix it, but I don't think I can. There it was, the truth he had been holding back for so long. I had always known that David was struggling, but hearing him admit it out loud made everything feel real. He was torn, not just between Mia and me, but between the life he had envisioned for himself and the reality that was crashing down around him. I reached across the table and placed a hand on his. "David, I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. You don't have to carry everything on your own. But I can't fix it for you. I can only be here to listen." Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the vulnerability I had missed. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I don't know how to make things right. I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing anymore." I squeezed his hand gently. "David, none of us have all the answers. You don't have to know exactly what to do right now. But you have to stop running away from the people who love you. You have to be honest with yourself. And with me." He nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes. "I think I'm starting to understand that." The conversation went on for another hour, each word between us stripping away the layers of confusion and pain that had built up over time. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was talking to my son again, not the distant, disconnected person I had been trying to reach, but the young man who still needed guidance and love. When David finally stood to leave, I felt a sense of quiet relief wash over me. We weren't there yet, not by a long shot. But we were getting there. Slowly, and maybe that was enough. "I'll be okay, Mom," he said softly. "I promise." I watched him walk out the door, the weight of everything still hanging heavy between us. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. The next few days passed in a haze. There were moments when I thought everything would be okay, that David and I had turned a corner in our relationship. But then there were the darker moments, quiet nights spent wondering if our talk had really meant anything at all. Was David truly ready to face the challenges before him, or was he just saying the things he thought I needed to hear? I had no answers. And as the days stretched on, I found myself struggling to be patient with the uncertainty. Mia had been quiet since our meeting. I didn't know if she was giving me space, or if she had decided that the conversation we'd had was enough. But then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from her. I stared at it for a moment, hesitant to open it. After all, what more was there to say? But curiosity got the best of me, and I tapped the screen. "We need to talk." Just those 3 words, so simple, yet so heavy. I quickly typed back. "About what?" Her response came a few seconds later. "It's about David. There's something I've been hiding from you." I froze, my heart racing. What could she be hiding? My thoughts swirled. Had something happened between her and David? Had he made a decision? Or was this just another attempt to complicate things further? My mind was a mess, but one thing was clear: I needed answers. I couldn't keep walking in the dark, hoping things would sort themselves out. If Mia had something to say, then I had to listen. I agreed to meet her at the same cafe as before, and when I walked through the door, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting at the same table, her hands nervously wringing a napkin. She looked up when I approached, her face pale, her eyes wide with worry. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly, her voice shaking just a little. I sat down across from her, not saying anything at first. The silence between us felt heavy, laden with unsaid words. Finally, Mia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to tell you this, but I can't keep hiding it. David and we've been keeping something from you. And I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing by telling you, but you deserve to know." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about, Mia?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "I found out I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a freight train. My mind immediately began to race, but I couldn't seem to make sense of it all. I just stared at her, unsure of what to say. David was going to be a father? How was that even possible? Hadn't he told me that he was struggling with his own future? I don't know how to handle this," Mia continued, her voice faltering. "I never meant for it to happen like this. I never wanted to come between you and David, but now, things are changing so fast. I don't know what to do." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything. My son was going to be a father. A part of me wanted to shout, to accuse her of somehow manipulating the situation, but the other part of me could see the fear in her eyes. This was real, and I could feel it in my bones. "How is David taking this?" I asked, my voice tight with emotion. Mia's eyes flickered with uncertainty. He's not handling it well. He doesn't know how to feel about it, and I don't know how to help him. He's scared, and he's angry. I don't think he's ready to be a father." The weight of her words sank in slowly. I had suspected that David was struggling, but this was a whole new layer of complexity. The child that was supposed to be a symbol of hope for the future now seemed like an enormous weight, one that could potentially break him. I took a deep breath. "What does David want?" Mia bit her lip, then looked up at me. "He doesn't know. He's confused. He's not sure if he's ready for this kind of responsibility, and I don't know how to help him sort through his feelings. But I think he feels like he's been backed into a corner, like there's no way out. And I don't know if that's fair to him." I felt a pang of sympathy for her then. No one could blame her for the situation, but I could tell that she, too, was lost. She didn't have the answers. And neither did I. "I understand that this is a lot to process, Mia," I said slowly, my mind racing. "But I need you to understand that David needs time to figure this out. And I need time too. We both do." She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I know. I don't want him to hate me. I don't want him to feel trapped." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. No one wants to feel trapped. And right now, David is in a place where he feels like he has no control over his life. But he still needs to understand that he does have options, even if he feels lost. Mia's voice cracked as she spoke again. "I don't want him to lose you too. I think he's afraid of disappointing you. He's always looked up to you, and I think he feels like he's failed you. He's never been this scared before, and I think he's pushing everyone away because of it." Her words struck me harder than I expected. David had always been my son, my responsibility, my joy. But now he was stepping into a role I had never imagined for him, and neither of us was prepared for it. "I don't know if I can fix this," I said softly, my voice breaking. "But I do know one thing. I will always be here for him. I don't care what happens with you or anyone else. I'm not going anywhere." Mia looked at me, her face a mixture of gratitude and fear. "I don't know what to say. Thank you. I'm sorry for everything." I shook my head. "Don't apologize. We're all just trying to figure this out." The conversation ended soon after, and I walked out of the cafe with my heart heavy with unanswered questions. David was facing a reality I hadn't prepared for. And now, more than ever, I realized that my role in his life was shifting. I wasn't just his mother anymore. I was part of a much larger picture, a picture that was about to get even more complicated. The days after my conversation with Mia felt heavier than I could have anticipated. I had learned so much, but the knowledge only seemed to complicate everything further. David was going to be a father. Mia was pregnant. The news hit me in waves, first as a rush of disbelief, then as a cloud of overwhelming worry. David's silence continued, but this time, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest. I needed to talk to him. I needed to make sure he knew that he wasn't alone in this, whether he was ready to accept that or not. But every time I picked up the phone to call him, something held me back. Was I pushing him too hard? Was I trying to fix everything when he needed the space to figure things out on his own? The uncertainty in my heart was louder than the rational part of my mind that told me to give him time. But how much time could I give him? I hadn't been able to stop thinking about the child he would be bringing into the world, about the responsibilities that came with it. Mia's words echoed in my mind. I don't want him to hate me. I don't want him to feel trapped. I understood that fear. But the weight of this child, it wasn't something David could simply walk away from no matter how much he might want to. This wasn't just about Mia or me anymore. This was about a new life, one that had no idea of the struggles its parents were facing. I had always believed that parenthood was something that would come naturally to David. He had always been a caring person, compassionate and empathetic. But this was a different kind of test. It wasn't just about being a good person anymore. It was about being responsible, being strong in the face of uncertainty. The thought terrified me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, trying to clear my mind. My phone was silent, no calls from David, no messages. I didn't know whether to be relieved or frustrated. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking the silence. I got up quickly, my heart racing. Could it be David? I opened the door and standing there, with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, was David. He looked worn out, his face tired, his eyes a little too distant for my liking. David, I said softly, stepping back to let him in. I wasn't expecting you. Come in. He walked in slowly, almost hesitantly, like he wasn't sure what to expect once he crossed the threshold. As I closed the door behind him, I could feel the tension in the air, like something important was about to be said. But neither of us spoke at first. We just stood there, both waiting for the other to make the first move. Finally, David broke the silence. I know you've been worried about me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't want to push him, but I couldn't let this moment slip by either. He needed to talk. He needed to say whatever was on his mind. I don't know what to do, Mom, he continued, his voice strained. I don't know what's right anymore. I'm scared. And I'm angry. I don't know how I ended up here. I felt my heart ache for him. This wasn't the confident, independent young man I had raised. This was a scared, lost kid, trapped in a situation he didn't know how to handle. You're scared, and that's okay, I said quietly, stepping toward him. This is a lot for anyone to take in, and you don't have to have all the answers right now. But you need to stop running away from it. You can't pretend it's not real. This is your life, David. And Mia's life. And this baby's life. David looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this. I nodded, understanding the frustration in his words. I know. But life doesn't always give us what we want. What matters now is how you handle it. What matters is that you start taking responsibility for your choices, no matter how hard they might be. There was a long pause before David spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I don't know if I'm ready to be a father. I don't know how to do this. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You don't have to have it all figured out today. But you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign of insincerity. But all he found was the truth. I wasn't going anywhere. I don't know if I'm enough, David whispered. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough for her or the baby? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded with all of his fears and doubts. It broke my heart to hear him talk like this, but at the same time, I knew it was something he had to work through. "You're enough, David," I said firmly, placing my hand on his shoulder. "You are more than enough. But you have to believe it too. And you have to be willing to try. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. But that doesn't mean we don't try to be better." David let out a shaky breath, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the son I had known, one who wasn't afraid to let his guard down, one who still needed me. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "I'm scared of failing. I'm scared of disappointing everyone, including myself." I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "I'm scared, too. But we'll do it together. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try." We stood there for a while, in the quiet of the room, holding on to each other. It wasn't an easy moment. There was no quick fix, no magic solution. But in that moment, I felt like we were beginning to understand each other again. David wasn't ready to be a father, but he was beginning to accept that it was happening. And I wasn't going to leave him to navigate it alone. "I'll be here, no matter what," I whispered, as he pulled away slightly to look at me. "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you, Mom." With that, I realized that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with questions and doubts. But we would face it together. The next chapter of our lives had already begun, and it would change everything. The following days were a blur of emotions. David had opened up, and for that, I felt a sense of relief. But now, the weight of what was coming was setting in. The reality of his impending fatherhood was undeniable. Mia's pregnancy was no longer something that hung in the balance, it was real, and the clock was ticking. I spent the next few days reflecting on the choices I had made for my own life and the path I had tried to chart for David. I had always hoped he would find his way, that he would become the man I knew he could be, but this was beyond anything I had prepared for. I had always been his protector, his guide, but this time, it wasn't about giving advice or steering him on the right path. This time, it was about standing beside him and offering a steady hand as he took the first uncertain steps into the unknown. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But more than anything, I wanted him to understand that it wasn't just about being a father. It was about being a man who could accept responsibility and take ownership of his life. The man I had raised had the capacity for greatness, but he had to see it for himself. One afternoon, as I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, I received a message from Mia. She wanted to meet, to talk about the next steps. I knew this moment was coming, and I had been dreading it. What did she expect from me? What did I expect from her? The last time we'd spoken, the conversation had been heavy, and now there were even more things to discuss. I agreed to meet her at a cafe near my home, the same place where I'd met her a few days ago. It felt strangely fitting. This was where everything had started to unravel, and now it felt like it was the place where I might find some semblance of clarity. When I arrived, Mia was already sitting at a table, her hands clasped tightly together. She looked more tired than I'd ever seen her, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. I felt an ache for her, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the tension in the pit of my stomach. What was this conversation going to bring? "Hi," I said quietly as I sat down across from her. "How are you?" She sighed, staring at her hands for a moment before meeting my gaze. "I'm okay. Just trying to process everything, you know? I keep asking myself if I'm making the right choices, but the truth is, I don't know." I nodded, letting the silence stretch out for a few moments. "I understand. This isn't easy for anyone, Mia." She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've been thinking a lot about what's best for the baby. I know David is struggling with everything, and I don't want to make things harder for him. But I also can't pretend like everything is going to be fine when it's not." I could see the struggle in her face, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for her. She was scared too. She was just as uncertain about the future as David was, and that made it even harder for her to know what was the right thing to do. I know you're both scared, I said gently. But I need you to understand that David needs time. He's not ready yet, but that doesn't mean he won't be. And it doesn't mean he doesn't care. We all have our own ways of dealing with big changes, and I know he's trying to figure out how to handle this. Mia's lip trembled. But what if he never does figure it out? What if he decides he's not ready for this, and I have to do this alone? I could see the fear in her eyes, and it broke my heart. She was scared of being alone in this, of raising a child without the support she thought she would have. I understood that fear all too well, because it was a fear I had once lived with. Raising a child as a single parent was the hardest thing I had ever done, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I also knew that the one thing I had never stopped believing in was the power of love. If David could find the strength to love this child, everything else would follow. And Mia needed to hear that, too. You won't be alone in this, Mia, I said softly. I will be here for you, just like I'll be here for David. You're not alone. And neither is he. Mia nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. I know you mean that, but I can't help but feel like I'm just another complication in David's life. Like he never wanted any of this to happen. I leaned forward, looking her squarely in the eyes. David didn't ask for this, but that doesn't mean he won't rise to the occasion. He's been through a lot, and he's struggling. But I've seen him face challenges before, and I know that he has the strength to do what's right. He just needs a little time to get there. Mia's shoulder slumped, and she sighed again. I just wish things could be different. I wish I could see a clear path forward, but right now, everything feels like a mess. It is a mess, I agreed. But life doesn't come with a blueprint. We have to make our own way, even when we don't know where we're going. And it won't be perfect, but that doesn't mean it won't be worthwhile. Mia's eyes softened as she listened to me. I want to believe that, she whispered. I really do. You will, I said, offering her a small smile. But it's going to take time. And it's going to take patience. From all of us. We sat there for a long time, the weight of the conversation settling over us both. I knew there was so much more to figure out, but at least we were starting to face it together. As difficult as it was, this was a turning point. There was no going back now. The future was uncertain, but we could navigate it together, one step at a time. The week after my conversation with Mia, I couldn't shake the sense that something was about to change. The calm moments felt too still, too quiet. My thoughts were constantly occupied with the heavy burden that David had to face, becoming a father, figuring out his relationship with Mia, navigating the weight of responsibilities he had never asked for. I had raised him to be a good man, but I couldn't protect him from everything. I couldn't shield him from the reality of the choices he had made. It wasn't just Mia who was struggling. David had his own set of demons to fight, even if he wasn't willing to admit it. The silence between us was becoming a growing distance. I had tried calling him a few times, but each time he either didn't answer or would give a vague excuse. My gut told me that he was shutting me out. And even though I tried to tell myself that he needed space, I couldn't help but worry. Was I doing the right thing by giving him this space? I knew what I had to do next. The idea had been lingering at the back of my mind, and it gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to talk to him, but not just a quick conversation. I needed to make him see what was at stake. It wasn't just about him anymore. He had someone who depended on him now. A baby. That child wasn't going to wait until he was ready. I stood up from the couch, pacing the living room as I stared out the window, letting the weight of it all settle on me. I had been through difficult things in my life, heartbreak, disappointment, loss, but this felt different. This was my son, and for the first time, I felt as though I didn't know how to help him. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. It rang for several moments before it clicked to voicemail. I cursed under my breath and dialed again. This time, after a few rings, he picked up. Mom, what's up? David's voice sounded distant, distracted, and I could hear a faint noise in the background. He wasn't alone. We need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's important. I'm coming over. There was a long pause on the other end before he responded. Mom, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Things are complicated right now. David, I said, my tone firm. It's more complicated when you avoid it. I'm coming over and we're going to talk. This is too big to keep ignoring. I didn't give him a chance to protest further before hanging up. My heart pounded in my chest, but I knew this was the only way. He needed to hear it from me, no distractions, no running away. He needed to understand the gravity of the situation. He needed to feel the weight of what was about to change, and that it wasn't just about Mia or me anymore. It was about his future and the future of his child. I drove over to his apartment, the same one he'd been living in for the past couple of years. It was quiet as I approached the door, my mind racing with everything I had to say. I knocked, and after a few moments, the door opened. David stood there, looking every bit the man I had always known, but there was something different about him. His eyes were tired, his face tense, as if the world was pressing down on him in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. Behind him, I could hear muffled voices, Mia's, and perhaps a few others. I didn't expect you to come by today, David said, stepping back to let me inside. I'm not sure if now's the right time. I could see it in his eyes, he was trying to avoid the inevitable. But there was no more time to dance around the truth. He had to face it. David, we need to talk, I said, my voice low and steady as I stepped past him into the apartment. About everything. About what's happening next. He closed the door behind me, and we stood in silence for a few seconds. I could tell that Mia was in the other room, and I knew this conversation was long overdue. I don't know what you want me to say, Mom, David muttered, his hands shoved into his pockets as he stared at the ground. I'm trying to figure it all out. But every time I think I've got a grip on things, it slips away from me. I took a deep breath, trying to control my own emotions. You're not going to figure it all out on your own, David. You don't have to do this by yourself. I know, he said, looking up at me. But I feel like no matter what I do, it's not enough. It's like I'm drowning in all of this and I can't breathe. I'm not here to tell you that everything is going to be perfect, I said softly. But I am telling you that you don't have to do it alone. You have Mia and you have me. You have people who care about you, who want to help you through this. But you need to stop running away from it. David let out a shaky breath, his frustration clear. But what if I fail, Mom? What if I'm not a good enough father? What if I ruin everything? The question hung in the air like a weight. I could hear the panic in his voice, the fear that had taken hold of him. And I knew that part of the answer was something I couldn't give him. He had to find that answer for himself. But there was something I could give him. Something more important than reassurance. You're not going to be perfect, I said, stepping closer to him. No one is. But the important thing is that you try, that you show up, that you choose to face this head-on, no matter how terrifying it is. David's shoulders sagged, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimmer of vulnerability in his eyes. I don't know how to do this, Mom. I'm scared. I placed my hand on his shoulder, looking him in the eyes. You don't have to know how to do it right now. You just have to start. One step at a time. And I'll be here to support you. No matter what. We stood there for a long time, the silence between us stretching as we both processed the weight of what had been said. David was still scared, still uncertain. But I could see a flicker of hope in his eyes, a small sign that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe that he wasn't as alone in this as he had thought. In that moment, I knew that things weren't going to be easy. But with every conversation, every word, we were inching closer to a future where David could find the strength to be the man he needed to be. And that was all I could ask for. Weddings are supposed to be joyful events, moments when families come together, when love is celebrated, when promises are made. That's what I had always imagined for my son. A perfect day. One where he stood proudly at the altar, surrounded by people who loved him, ready to begin a new chapter. But that's not what happened. Because sometimes, love alone isn't enough. The morning of the wedding, everything felt wrong. The sky was overcast, and the air held a strange stillness, like the world knew something we didn't. I had tried my best to put on a brave face. I picked out a dress that I had bought months ago when I still believed this day would bring joy. I curled my hair, put on lipstick, even smiled at myself in the mirror. But my heart was heavy. David had been quiet the entire week. After our emotional conversation, I had hoped he would begin to take small steps toward responsibility, toward maturity, toward Mia. But instead, he seemed frozen in place. He wasn't making plans. He wasn't excited. And worst of all, he wasn't honest with himself or anyone else. When I arrived at the venue, it looked beautiful. Everything was set. White chairs lined up in perfect rows, soft music playing in the background, flowers in full bloom. Guests were beginning to arrive, most of them smiling, chatting, unaware of the storm building behind the scenes. Mia stood with her bridesmaids, her hands trembling as she clutched her bouquet. I went to her, offering a hug, and I could feel her anxiety radiating off her skin. "You look beautiful," I whispered. "Thank you," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. There were so many things I wanted to say in that moment. I wanted to tell her that it was okay to have doubts, that it was okay to pause, to take a breath. But I also didn't want to add to her stress, not today. Not now. And then came the silence. It started with whispers. David hadn't shown up yet. No one had seen him. The groomsmen were making calls. The officiant looked confused. Time kept moving forward, but he wasn't there. I excused myself and stepped outside, pulling out my phone. I dialed him, straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Panic began to swell in my chest, not just because he was late, but because I knew, deep down, what this meant. David wasn't coming. I called him one more time. This time, I left a message. "David, it's Mom. I need you to listen to me. If you're scared, that's okay. If you're not ready, that's okay too. But you owe me an answer. You owe yourself one. Please, just come here and talk to her. Talk to us. Don't disappear." I stood there for a few moments, the phone still pressed to my ear even after the message ended. Hoping, praying, nothing. Finally, I went back inside. Mia looked at me as soon as I entered. One look at my face and she knew. The color drained from her cheeks. Her bridesmaids tried to console her, but there was no disguising the truth. David wasn't coming. Everything that had been so carefully planned, the vows, the music, the reception, it all came undone in a matter of minutes. Guests began to murmur. A few people discreetly slipped out. The weight of the moment collapsed onto all of us at once. And then Mia looked at me. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were full of tears. "He's not ready, is he?" I swallowed hard. "No, he's not." She nodded slowly, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. I knew. I think I knew all along. I just didn't want to believe it. I wanted to say something comforting, something that would make her feel less abandoned, less humiliated. But there was nothing I could say that would make this better. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't deserve this." "No one does," she replied softly. She turned away then, walking out of the ceremony hall with her bridesmaids close behind. She was heartbroken, but she walked with dignity. She didn't scream. She didn't crumble in front of everyone. She held her head high. It was in that moment that I realized something important. Mia had shown more strength than David had in the entire lead-up to this wedding. I stayed for a little while, helping the organizers as best I could, apologizing to guests, thanking those who stayed. And then I left. When I got home, I sat in the dark. I waited. Hours passed. Finally, just past midnight, I heard a knock on my door. It was David. His eyes were red. His suit jacket was wrinkled, like he had thrown it on last minute. He looked like a man who had been running from something and had finally decided to stop. "I couldn't do it," he said quietly. I nodded slowly, not angry. Just tired. I know. I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, he said. I couldn't go in. I couldn't look her in the eyes and make a promise I knew I wasn't ready to keep. You should have told her. I know. I was a coward. There was no argument in me. He was right. I hurt her, he continued, collapsing onto the couch. I hurt everyone. Yes, I said, sitting beside him. You did. I thought love would be enough. But it's not, is it? I sighed. Love matters. But love without commitment? Without courage? It's not enough. David buried his face in his hands. What do I do now? I placed a hand on his shoulder. You start by owning what you did. You talk to Mia. You apologize. And then you grow up, David. No more hiding. No more disappearing. He didn't respond right away. He just sat there, quietly absorbing the truth. The wedding never happened. But something else did. For the first time, David saw what running away cost him. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of him becoming the man he needed to be. The day after the wedding that wasn't, the world kept turning, but it felt quieter somehow, like even the sun didn't know how to shine through what had happened. I woke up with a hollow feeling in my chest, the weight of disappointment still thick in the air. David had fallen asleep on my couch, still in his crumpled wedding suit, a man haunted by the pain he'd caused. I stood in the doorway for a few moments, watching him breathe. My son, my beautiful, brilliant, broken son. He'd finally stopped running, but now he was surrounded by the wreckage of what that running had cost him. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, letting the steam rise into my face, hoping it might somehow clear the fog in my head. There was no guidebook for this, no step-by-step for what to do after your child blows up their future in front of everyone. Around 9 a.m., David stirred. I didn't speak right away. I wanted him to be the first to break the silence. He walked into the kitchen, rubbing his face, eyes swollen and voice gravelly. I owe her everything, and I gave her nothing. You owe her honesty, David. That's the least you can give her now. He nodded slowly, then sat across from me and wrapped his hands around the coffee mug I slid toward him. I was afraid. I still am. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who bails. But I am. No, I said gently. You were. That doesn't mean you have to stay that way. He stared into his coffee for a long time. She deserves someone better. She deserved the truth. And you need to be someone better. That starts now. Not tomorrow. Not after you feel ready. His jaw clenched. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? I don't know, I admitted. And that's not what you should be aiming for right now. You don't fix this for her forgiveness. You fix it because it's the right thing to do. David nodded, the understanding sinking in. Later that day, he asked if I thought he should reach out to Mia. I said yes, but only if he was ready to listen more than he spoke. Only if he was going to show up for real this time. Not with excuses, not with apologies he didn't fully mean, but with accountability. To my surprise, he called her that afternoon. She didn't answer at first. But a few hours later, Mia texted him back. We can meet. Tomorrow. Public place. 3 p.m. The next day, he was a different man. Quiet. Focused. He didn't ask me what to say. He just got dressed, got in his car, and left. I watched from the window as he drove away, praying he wouldn't mess it up again. When he came back hours later, I was waiting. She's not ready to forgive me, he said, stepping inside. But she said she appreciated me coming. She said she needed time. That she didn't trust me. And I don't blame her. Did you tell her about the baby? I asked. He nodded. I told her I still want to be in the child's life. That I'll do everything I can, even if she never wants to be with me again. And do you mean it? His voice didn't waver. Yes, I meant it. That night, we sat on the porch together, the first time we'd done that in years. Just like when he was a boy, after a hard day, and I'd hold his hand or wrap him in a blanket and tell him the world was still good. Only this time, the silence between us felt like growth. Like something was healing. I still don't know how to be a father, he said quietly. None of us do, until we are, I replied. But you're already learning. He looked at me. Do you think I'll be a good one? I think you'll be a real one. And that's what matters. He looked out at the stars, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw peace settle into his expression. Not because everything was okay, but because he was finally facing it. Not running. Not hiding. Just showing up. Weeks passed. The shock of the broken wedding began to fade, not disappear, but shift into something quieter, less raw. People stopped whispering. The relatives who had flown in returned to their routines. The vendors packed up and moved on to their next events. But for us, for David, for Mia, and for me, the consequences lingered. David started working longer hours. He told me it was to save for the baby, but I knew it was more than that. He needed to feel useful, to reclaim a sense of control. Every evening, he'd come home, sit at my kitchen table, and we'd talk. Not always about the deep things, sometimes just about groceries or the news, but the talking mattered. One evening, he said, I didn't just fail Mia. I failed you too. I was quiet for a moment. David, you didn't fail me. You're learning. That's what growing up looks like, facing your mess and doing better. I'm trying, he said. But it feels like I have to earn everyone's trust again. You do, I said honestly. But you're on your way. Meanwhile, Mia kept her distance. She wasn't cruel about it, just firm. Boundaries. She had every right. When David texted her updates, appointments he'd like to attend, things he was researching about babies, she answered briefly, but without warmth. He didn't push. He respected her space. Still, one small victory came 2 weeks later when she invited him to her next prenatal checkup. She said, I can come, he told me, eyes wide, like a kid who'd just won a prize. She said I can be there. The appointment changed him. He told me later that hearing the heartbeat, his child's heartbeat, made it all real in a way nothing else had. It was fast, he said, placing his hand over his chest. Like a tiny drum inside her. I didn't know something that small could hit me that hard. I smiled. Welcome to the beginning of the rest of your life. From that moment on, he was different. He started building a crib in my garage. He printed out baby name lists and taped them to the fridge. He asked questions, hundreds of them, about swaddling, sleep training, baby monitors. For the first time, he wasn't overwhelmed by fear. He was fueled by purpose. Then, one Sunday afternoon, Mia came over. She looked cautious, holding herself tightly like someone bracing for an earthquake. But she stepped inside. I thought it might help, she said, if we started talking. About co-parenting. About what this looks like. I made myself disappear into the garden, but I watched from the window, heart pounding, as they sat down in the living room. Their conversation was quiet, but intense. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shifts in their body language. Mia crying, then smiling. David holding his head in his hands, then reaching for hers. They weren't lovers anymore, but they were something deeper now. Two people bound by something bigger than their failed relationship. When Mia left, David sat down on the porch beside me. We're going to do it together, he said. Not as a couple, but as parents. She trusts me. A little. That's all you need to begin. He looked at me. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For staying. For not giving up on me. Tears stung my eyes. I reached for his hand. You think I came this far just to quit on you now? He laughed softly, then grew serious. I treated you like you were nothing sometimes. When you just wanted what was best for me. That's something I'll regret for a long time. I shook my head. You're here now. That's what matters. You're finally becoming the man I always knew you could be. And for the first time in a long while, I saw it. In his eyes. In his posture. In the way he spoke about Mia and the baby. He wasn't perfect, but he was ready. There are moments in life that define us not because they're perfect, but because they test every part of who we are. This was one of those moments. The air was crisp that morning. The leaves had started to turn orange, gold, and a few stubborn greens hanging on. I stood on the front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the world wake up, knowing everything in our lives was about to change. Mia was due any day now. David had moved into a small apartment near her place, a sign that he was serious about co-parenting. It wasn't just words anymore. It was action. He went to every prenatal appointment, took birthing classes, even started meal prepping freezer containers for when the baby came. Who was this man? Certainly not the same one who had disappeared on his wedding day. But maybe, just maybe, the best version of him was born from that very mistake. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was David. "It's happening," he said. "We're going to the hospital." I didn't hesitate. I was out the door in 5 minutes, car keys in hand, heart racing. By the time I got there, he was already pacing the hallway, eyes wide with panic and joy. "She's already in labor," he said. "They think it'll be soon. Hours, maybe." "Are you going in with her?" "She asked me to," he said, his voice cracking. "She actually wants me there." And he went. He stayed the entire time. Through her screams, through the hours of exhaustion, through the tears. And when it was over, when a tiny, wrinkled little baby girl entered the world with a cry that sounded like life itself, David was the one who held her first. He named her Ellie Grace. He said she looked like Mia, but she had my eyes. I didn't argue. I visited a few hours later. Mia was resting. David was sitting in a chair beside the hospital bed, his daughter bundled in his arms, staring at her like she was made of stardust. "She's perfect," he whispered. I didn't think I could feel this way about anyone. I sat beside him, my eyes filling with tears. "You just became someone new, David. That's what happens when you meet your child for the first time. Everything changes." He nodded, still unable to take his eyes off her. I didn't think I deserved this. After everything I did, after how I ran away. But I'm going to make this right. Every single day. I don't care how hard it is. And I believed him. Because this wasn't the boy who had ghosted his own wedding. This wasn't the son who had blamed everyone else for his fear. This was a man. A father. And he was here. Later that night, I stepped outside the hospital room and looked back through the glass. David was still holding Ellie. He looked tired. Overwhelmed. But he also looked full of something rare and real purpose. And I realized something. The story didn't end at that wedding. It started here. With a cry, a promise, and a father who finally chose to stay. Conclusion, from a mother's heart. You can't control what your children do. You can't script their choices or fix their mistakes. But you can stand by them. Speak hard truths. And love them even when they push you away. David treated me like nothing. And for a while, he made choices that broke us both. But I ended his wedding not out of spite, but out of love. Because walking away that day was the first step toward him finally walking into his real life. Now I see a man who knows what matters. And I'd do it all again if it meant leading him here. Sometimes, to rebuild something real, you have to burn down the version of yourself that was never ready to begin with. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?